Hello there, it's Cypher King Omar, and today we're going to be discussing Hidan versus the Sound 4. Now, this topic has been flowing around a lot of YouTube comment section, with a lot of people talking about it being, sort of interesting, and I'm going to be honest, it's really not. Hidan versus the Sound 4 is not close whatsoever, and I'm going to show to you why in this video. So starting off with the Sound 4, in base, they're really not that impressive. Their best feat is comparing to a tuning exam Saste, who is the one of the stronger members of the tuning exams. They're only able to really deal with him without his two Tomoe in a 1v1. Now, while I have heard a lot of people say that Saste destroyed the Sound 4, that is just a complete misinterpretation of the fight. That's not even close to how the fight went. The way it happened is that Sasuke attacks Sakon first. Sakon blocks all of his kicks, and then Sasuke has to use a wire to trip Sakon up, and then lands a blow on him. And then Sakon lands another blow on Sasuke and fights him. And then he's able to pressure him, and then the other Sound 4 members jump in. Then they kick his ass, and then they just chuck him over. Nowhere in the fight does Sasuke show complete superiority over the Sound 4. But it's still not impressive to only be ranked to a tuning when we're fighting characters like Hidan, who are able to combat characters like Asuma, who are stated to be near Kakashi's level in the data. The real interesting part is going to be the Sound 4 in their Curse Mark Stage 2 phase, but even that's not impressive. Here's why. See, all four members of the Sound 4, after they seal Sasuke in the coffin, are approached by two Jonin, Genma, and Raida. These guys are not on Kakashi's level and are stated to be Tokobetsu Jonin, but the main reason why is because their combat skills are just better, but they don't have any other skills. Now, while it does seem impressive for the Sound 4 to beat the two Jonin, they had to jump them in a 4v2, but the main part is that they were out of chakra and exhausted coming back from a mission. Genma actually says to Tsunade that, granted, we were out of chakra, but we still shouldn't have lost to them. And then Tayuya even states that she had to use Curse Mark Stage 2 to fight two Jonin, and Sakon says it couldn't be helped. So to say that the Sound 4 scale to the Jonin is just not true. They're blatantly far below the Jonin. This is really not good for the Sound 4 because we have Hidan, who should just scale massively above Genma and Raito, especially in their fatigued state, as Hidan's best feat is comparing to Asuma and Kakashi, but I'm going to go over his Asuma feat first, because a lot of people really misinterpret Hidan's fight against Asuma. Many people like to simplify Hidan's fight against Asuma as, oh, he got his head cut off by Asuma, he's below Asuma, he's trash. And while I do agree that Hidan did lose to Asuma with his head cut off, it really ignores a lot of context in that fight. So for first off, when we see the fight between when we see the fight between Hidan and Asuma, we see that Hidan is constantly having to dodge Shikamaru's Shadow Possession Jutsu while also combating Asuma in a 1v1. Asuma is stated to have close quarters combat superior to that of Kakashi's, so you could state that Hidan in close quarters combat is actually better than even Kakashi due to this scaling, which I am of the interpretation of. Not only that, but when Hidan finally lands a hit on Asuma, he is backflipping 3 times and launches his scythe while backflipping and dodging Shikamaru's Shadow Possession Jutsu. After he dodges, after he lands a hit, he then stands in place. Asuma then lands a hit when he stands in place because he doesn't know about the ritual and takes damage. Hidan then stabs his knee. Asuma falls on the ground, and Shikamaru has to pull Hidan out of his circle with his Shadow Possession Jutsu, and then Asuma cuts his head off. So, while I do agree that Asuma did cut off Hidan's head, it doesn't really mean much when he had to have someone else completely save him from the fight to be able to do it. It's kind of like saying Team Taka is above Killer B because they beat Killer B in a fight. And while it is true, it ignores the context that actually happens in that fight. So I would put Hidan on a much higher rank to the peak Jonin tier of Part 2 Kakashi and Asuma level, which is noted because Part 1 Kakashi is actually noted to be very rusty, and in the one decade 100 Ninja Guide, Kakashi is stated to train every single day during the 2 year time skip, and we know that he's been more active and going on more missions and getting a lot stronger in that time skip area as well, with him actually unlocking his Mangekyo Sharingan, which you could argue also amped his physical stats. This this is really bad for the Sound Four, as their best feats are scaling to tired Jonin, who are still below a Part One Kakashi. So Hidan's stats should be massively above their stats as well. Well, which makes the case even better. Another argument to add for Hidan is he was also able to parry off and threaten Kakashi. Now, a lot of people like to say that he only threatened Kakashi because Kakashi was on the back foot. This is wrong because Hidan was able to fight and parry all of Kakashi's attacks, and they also is a panel of them running towards each other and slicing other and then parrying off that attack. If you guys have ever seen like common anime or manga, they usually show this when two characters run past each other with swords or a weapon to see a big clash happen. We see the same thing with Hidan and Kakashi, and they're able to react at the same time. Not only that, but Hidan also has shown reaction feats comparable to Kakuzu, who was also just above Kakashi. Kakuzu was a They react at the same time to the explosion when they're against Yugito, when Zetsu shows up, when they run toward the monks. They're able to dodge at the same pace as Shikamaru's Shadow Possession Jutsu, and they're also able to swing their arms up in the exact same time. So to say that Hidan is not on Kakuzu's level isn't true. And I think another reason why people say that is due to that statement where Hidan says, "My aim is the slowest and weakest of the Akatsuki." Now, while Hidan does say this, it does ignore the context. The context is that they're trying to drag Yugito out of the cave and try to lure her into fighting them. To where Kakuzu actually states to Hidan that you better be careful or you might die, which we know is just not true because Hidan can't die and Kakuzu knows that, so he's just blatantly lying to lure Yugito out. So Hidan should scale to a Part 2 Kakashi who is not massively, who is just above his version in Part 1. This Part 1 Kakashi being massively above any fatigued version of Genma and Raito, who are giving the Sound Force so much trouble that they had to rest and sit down near trees because they were forced to enter Curse Mart Stage 2. So for the fight, I can see Hidan just swinging his scythe around like a maniac, like he always do, and I think he could be able to tag many of the Sound Four members as they don't really have the best reaction feats in speed, and I do see Hidan getting his ritual off on one of them. I do think though that like if Hidan gets his ritual off on Sakon, there is a bit of debate if like Ukon can tank the attack, but we see that when Ukon gets stabbed by Konkuro's attack, like his little puppet show, that he just outright dies. So I really don't think that's the case. The one thing I do see Hidan doing is just joshing around and not really taking the fight seriously, as shown with the fight against Shikamaru. So maybe you could argue that one of the Sound 4 members, like Tayuya, gets a lucky Genjutsu off, and then characters like Kitamaru, like once they find out that Hidan's immortal, just shoots a arrow through his head. Or you could argue that Jirobo traps him in an Earth-style prison and then just sucks the chakra out of him dry. Those are possible win cons for the Sound 4, but I think that Hidan just has a better case here, with him being massively faster than all of them, and also having a lot better feats compared to them, with dodging attacks like Asama's attacks, and also being able to parry off Kakashi. It just doesn't really seem feasible for the Sound 4 to get their win cons off against Hidan. Not only that, but the Sound 4, when they're fighting together, don't really have the best synergy together, as Shikamaru notes that many of their that the Sound Four are very individualistic. They don't really work well together when they're fighting, which makes sense because they don't really like each other and are only really forced to work because Orochimaru says so. So while I do think that maybe they could get a win con off, like maybe sometimes, I would have Hidan probably slamming the Sound Four. No, not probably. Hidan would slam the Sound Four 9 out of 10 times with low to mid difficulty. It's like really dependent on if Hidan's just an idiot.